All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to White Collar Support Group Tuesday night speaker series. Tonight we have a very special speaker, Ron Bauer, calling in from London, England. More about Ron in a couple of minutes. I have a few announcements and a little bit of housekeeping. This meeting is brought to you by our White Collar Support Group that meets on Monday nights. Every Monday at p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And it is the Monday night meeting is specifically for people who are going through the white collar criminal justice system. We'll help you navigate your way through. More information on our website at prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist.org. A few announcements. First, we have our conference coming up, our second annual conference coming up on October 11th. It'll be from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, so that's 6 a.m. for you folks on the coast. Sorry about that. But we have our speakers lined up. We are going to have our sponsor deck all set in a couple of days, and we're going to distribute that to everybody. It'll also be on the website. And so anybody who'd like to be a sponsor or knows an attorney or anyone else who'd like to be a sponsor, grab a copy of our deck and please help us spread the word. We already have a bunch of sponsors already signed up, and it's going to be a really special conference this year. No sneak peeks tonight as to who some of our speakers are, but oh, what the hell? Jeffrey Toobin's going to be one of our speakers, a CNN commentator, and who wrote the book The Pardon, about the Nixon administration pardon. And he's an interesting and controversial guy. So Jeffrey Toobin, and also our own Brent Cassidy is going to be interviewing Joe Bankman, who is Sam Bankman-Fried's father, and he's going to be talking to us about the effects on the family, especially when you had such a high-profile prosecution as Sam had. So Joe, we've been talking to him for a couple of weeks now, and he's a terrific guy, and he's willing to really go deep for us, much as David Israel did last year for us. So thank you for that, and Brent, thank you for interviewing. And another sneak peek: Brent's going to be doing a podcast episode of his Nightmare Success podcast, and that'll release probably the day after the conference, something like that. That's what we did last year. So thank you for that, Brent, and thank you again, David, for being there for us last year. I will be in New York City on the morning of August 3rd. That's a Sunday morning, and I'll be speaking at St. Bart's Church on Park Avenue. So anybody who'd like, if you're in the New York area, come down. That's 10 a.m. in the morning on Sunday, August 3rd, and I hope you'll join us. We already have a crowd coming to that. I want to thank Kevin for last night, for being such a great topic leader last night. Um, I want to go to Stacy for a second. Stacy, if you just want to just fill us in on how your day was today, that would be great.
Hey everyone. I guess it went okay. Had a plea agreement for 21 to 27 months, and I was sentenced to 21 months with 2 years probation. I don't know where I'm going to be going yet. So I'll wait to get that letter to find out where I'm going and when I have to surrender. I guess I'm grateful that I got the low end of 21 months versus the 27 months, and I'm anxious for the next part. This was really hard for me. This was a hard day, so I'm so relieved. Just like everyone said I would be last night. I'm so relieved that it's over, and I'm so glad that I have you guys because it definitely made it a lot easier for me. So thank you.
Well, our prayers are with you, Stacy, and we're glad you're with us tonight. And well, let's wrap the love all around you. So bless
Thank you.
you and your family. Uh,
Thank you.
and thank you anyone who reached out to Stacy this morning before she went. I'm going to mute you, Stacy. Um, let's see. This will be available. Ron's talk will be available on YouTube, probably tomorrow, and on our website. And so that's it for announcements. And we're gonna go to Ron. So Ron Bauer has been a friend of mine and a client and a buddy for a few years now. And Ron's an incredible guy who has special skills in in the art of venture capital and raising money and doing all kinds of things internationally. Very well known guy in those circles. but yeah, admittedly, he had a lot to learn about some other things in life, and I think he's in the middle of learning some incredible lessons that he's going to share with us tonight. So, calling in from London, our speaker tonight is Ron Bauer. So, please help me welcome Ron Bauer.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So, I mean, it feels like a reunion party here. I know so many people on this call. It's like a birthday party. So, I'll start for those people that don't know me on this call. My background is I've been a venture capitalist and principal investor in early stage startups for about 25 years. I started in the business putting together my own deals and then, eventually exited some businesses, went back to school, was going to be an academic and started doing deals with other founders. And I was very prolific for the last 15 years, doing a lot of deals with universities, big, well-known scientists, academics, big universities like, you know, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Cornell, Columbia, Stanford, you name it. And, which made me an easy target for the DOJ and the SEC when, someone basically got in trouble in a sting operation and, you know, mentioned my name among other people's names. And, I was very high profile at the time when the DOJ was investigating a number of people in my business. And, I was an easy target. And, they came after me in April 2022. It's usually uh, most people, what's unique about my case is that a lot of people know when they're being investigated because, people will call them up and say, I was subpoenaed, or, someone called me up. The FBI came to my office or to my home and asked me about you, or I received a subpoena for information. And, I was totally blindsided. I was flying back into London, April 2022. I was flying back into London with my family from, an Easter holiday, what you'd call in the States, like a spring break holiday. And I landed Heathrow Airport, and I'm British and I'm Canadian, and I've been flying into Heathrow probably for 30 years, 35 years. My passport goes through the automatic passport check. I've never had anyone ever stop me. My passport didn't work. And it was the first time my older son was able to go through the electronic passport with his passport. So I thought I'd walk through with him. And my passport didn't work. It was a red X. And, I sent him through with my wife and my other son. And I said, I think I said to my wife, I have a bad feeling something's not good here. And I said, take the kids and go home and we'll figure this out. And I go to the passport desk, and the border service lady says to me, what you'd call, CB Customs and Border CBT in the States, we call, the UK Border Service. She said to me right away, do you have another passport with you, a Canadian passport? And, that's an odd question when you're British and you're flying into England. I've never been asked that. So I knew right away, and I said no. And she said, can you sit down? And I sat down, and of course, your mind starts racing and you don't know what to expect. And so the first thing I did was called up a lawyer that I worked with in the States. And I said, first of all, I'd never seen a police station. I'd never been arrested. At this point, I'm 47 years old, never had run in with law or the police or anything, just it was so out there. I've never even seen the inside of a police station. And so I call up this lawyer and I say, I think I'm going to be arrested. I don't have a good feeling about it. Do you have someone? Do you know anyone? I don't even know who to call in the UK. And he said, I had a client that got caught up in some Medicare fraud, and I have a guy that you can call. I'll tell him that you're going to be detained. And he gave me his number, and I called him up. He walked me through what was going to happen, and sure enough, a minute later, the the London Metropolitan Police show up, and they take me back. No handcuffs, no nothing. They said, are you Ronald Bauer? And I said yes. And they handed me this paper. It was from the National Crime Agency. So the NCA here, the National Crime Agency, is the UK's equivalent of the FBI, and they handle extradition requests by the Department of Justice in the US government. And so they handed me a paper before. They said, you have the right to read this paper. And there were so many lines in this document. There were probably like 30 different lines in there. I don't even know, 9 counts, maybe even more than 9 counts. So many different stuff in there. But it was all blacked. It was all redacted. There was nothing. It just said this fraud, that fraud, money laundering, wire fraud, so many charges, 20 years, this amount, but not giving up anything because everything was under seal. So there was no information. I said, how can I even review this? I don't even know what it is. And they're like, look, our job is just to take you. We're going to take you to a holding facility. So I got taken to a holding facility near Heathrow Airport. You know, if I thought that was going to be a bad place, I mean, that was probably the Beverly Hills of what was going to happen next. So I get to this facility, and the rule in the UK is, you're not arrested yet or being arraigned or anything. The first step of the process in the UK on an indictment is that you have to get extradited. And as a British citizen, you have the right to fight extradition. And so they detain me. They have to bring you in front of a magistrate within 24 hours. So the lawyer called me up and he said, "Look, this is what's going to happen." Now, if you think the process is bad in the States, the UK has created this whole circle of the legal system to basically milk clients out of money. And so a lawyer that represents you as a defense attorney can't actually appear on your behalf in court. You need a barrister. So not only do you have to pay a lawyer to give you advice, because the attorney has to retain the barrister. You can't even retain the barrister yourself. So now you have to pay a retainer to a lawyer. The lawyer has to speak to you. The lawyer then charges you to speak to the barrister. The barrister charges you to appear in court. So you have this whole web of people. I showed up in court the next morning. My arrest warrant basically was, you know, and I don't know, I'm not blaming anyone at this point, the journey so far, whether it was a mistake or whether it was, meant to be a mistake. But, the Department of Justice basically said that I'm Canadian flying through London. I'm a flight risk. And that's why they should arrest me and detain me and extradite me. They didn't say that I'm a British citizen and I've been living in the UK for 15 years and I have kids that go to school who were born in the UK and I own a home with my wife and everything's in my name. Nothing is being held or hidden. So we show up in court. I received bail the next, right away. But unfortunately, the bank was closed, so we couldn't post bail because I was held up. The court system in the UK is a joke compared. The US is like everything goes on time, and when you go in there, you have the same judge, everything's in order. In the UK, you have a different judge every time you appear. So the judge has to learn about your case, and it's such complicated cases that they don't want to make decisions. So the magistrate judge at the time gave me bond, set a high amount for the UK, and had a curfew as well. So I had to wear like an ankle monitor, but it's not like a GPS you have in the States. It's more of a location monitor to make sure that I'm honoring my curfew and I'm at home between midnight and 6 a.m. And but because we couldn't post bond, they had to send me to a remand prison. So I had to go to a prison called Wandsworth for the night, which is basically the equivalent of MDC Brooklyn, but much worse. And so you show up, bus takes you and you show up in this room and they have people there that are, child molesters, rapists, drug dealers, murderers, I mean, white collar crime, everything, gang members. You're all thrown into one big room there. And then you have to spend the night there. And so but it wasn't too bad. When I got there, it wasn't so bad. You have a cell. I ended up sharing a cell with a guy that was a white collar. He was done for VAT fraud, which is like an IRS tax evasion, and he was on a plea agreement there. And so I shared a cell with him for the night. And in the UK, you have your own TV. They have toasters. You have a phone in there. It's very different than the US. And so it wasn't too bad an experience. I got released the next day. Bond was posted and I got released. And I remember telling the story to Jeff once. And I remember that, they gave me all my stuff and they just opened the door. My phone was dead. I couldn't make any calls. And I'm like, how am I going to get home? I'm in like, this neighborhood, Wandsworth. And this neighborhood's like a shithole. Like I would have never gone to this neighborhood, let alone close to this prison. It's in like the dodgiest area of London. And I remember getting out there and I'm thinking to myself, what if someone like mugs me? What if I get stabbed here? What if I get robbed? And then it just hit me that I just spent 28 hours inside this prison with all these people and I was okay. I survived it. So I think I'm okay walking down the street to find a taxi. So, I made it home and that was sort of, the first week it was interesting because everything was under seal. No one knew about only my close friends and lawyers who helped me, get bond and get organized knew about the indictment. And for a week, it was like business normal. And I'm sort of like, is this going to ever come out? Is it not going to come out? Are they, what's going on? And I was trying to like, continue life as normal for a week. And then all of a sudden, a week later, they just unsealed the indictment, and it was like simultaneously the DOJ, the SEC came out with this massive case against me and 17 people. The DOJ came out with three cases in parallel, 10 people. They painted at me, the DOJ was like $100 million case, SEC was $145 million. They painted this out to be, one of the most sophisticated microcap frauds of all time and, crazy stuff. Daily Mail journalists showed up on my doorstep wanting to, get comments. And, I remember I was on a Zoom call which is ridiculous when I think about it. I was on a Zoom call with lawyers, auditors, investment banks, partners on an IPO that was about to go through. And then my phone was just went off the hook, kept beeping and beeping my WhatsApp and my messages and people sending me the indictment saying, is this true? Is this really you? Is this a mistake? And I'm like, I don't think it's a mistake. I hope it's a mistake, but apparently not. And so that was sort of when everything changed. It was almost like the DOJ, rang my doorbell, threw a grenade in my house, and then held the door closed. And my life changed from that day forward, and everything's been different for the past 3 years. And then I sort of moved on to, the next stage was sort of like choosing lawyers. And I think the most important thing, and this is the hardest decision I tell everyone, is choosing a lawyer. And people feel like when you choose a lawyer, you have to stick to them. Lawyer's not like a life partner or a child or a parent, or, you can get rid of lawyers, and I made a mistake that, I was being pitched left, right, and center. All these law firms that I'd worked with on Wall Street, they all had, lawyers that were dealing with, white collar defense, and everyone's, pitching me their services. They don't want to speak to me or work with me anymore in the securities business because obviously now I'm like a pariah, but they're happy to take my money and offer their partners services for, white collar defense. And so I went with this, fairly new lawyer who had just come out of the Southern District of New York, who was very, very experienced, had a high role in there, knew everybody in there, pitched his services to me, Yale graduate, very well educated, well-spoken guy. And I hired him. And, honestly, from day one, he didn't care whether I was innocent or guilty. He kept trying to push me to be a cooperator or bully me into a deal. He was like, "You're going to jail no matter what. We don't come after people, if they're not guilty and they've not done something wrong." And, he didn't even want to hear my side of the story or my version. And, and whether my version was the right version or a wrong version doesn't matter at this point. But, at that point, he kept pushing me in a corner and, telling me that if we don't take this deal, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse and pressuring me. And, just like Jeff gave me, Jeff was, a real good sounding board for me for advice and also someone just to, who'd gone through the process and someone that I could speak to and ask advice. And I had another good friend who, probably many of in the process, Walt Pavlo, who also, was helped me. Walt's an expert at people going through the extradition process and helping them with that whole process. And he said to me, asked me a really simple question. He said, ask the lawyer how many cases he has gone, how many people he's represented and gone to trial, how many cases he has actually gone to trial, what has his result be? And I remember saying, it's a really good question. How did I not ask this guy that question if he's representing me and this is such an important decision? And so I asked him that, and he was like, when someone like fumbles, like they can't answer it, he's like, no, well, I went to trial 22 times and I won, 21 times. I'm like, yeah, but you were the prosecutor. 99% of people lose that go to trial, and then the other people settle. That's not the right answer. What did you do as a defense attorney? And, it really, I remember, he put me in a corner saying, if you don't make this decision, it's off the table. And I sort of said, you know what, I'm going to switch at this point. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna switch lawyers. And I switched to a lawyer that, a guy named Aaron Katz from Boston, amazing guy, Harvard educated, real scrapper. He was, almost 20 years with ropes and gray in Boston. But what I really liked about him is his grandfather went to prison for 4 years. Okay, so he, as well growing up, he would go on a bus every weekend with his whole family and visit his grandfather in prison. And he, from a young age, he wanted to be a defense attorney and work with people that are going through what we've all gone through or what some of the people on this call are going through. And so I hired him right away. and everything changed. The SDNY's whole attitude changed instantly. This guy had gone to trial like 60 times. He'd represented some massive cases, people like, John Kapoor, from INSIS. He represented the engineer, from the Horizon oil spill, the BP spill, and really he's a fighter. And so the whole situation changed. And that was very important is choosing your lawyer. And so, as things came on, operating, and this is where part of my talks about, dealing with adversity and how do you continue doing business and stuff. And, I was very lucky that, everyone tried to screw me out of I was involved in like 15, 20 different projects. And yeah, Jeff worked with me as a lawyer, and a lot of lawyers were like, they were trying to bully me out of the deals and force me out. Everyone was saying, look, you're the problem. The deal's not going to happen because of you. And these were companies that I helped co-found, I raised money for, I introduced them to everyone, my whole network. And Jeff came in and said, look, you're not the problem, you're the solution, and you need to look at the situation the opposite way. You're not, just because something bad is going on in your life, these deals that you're involved in, they're not named in the indictment, they're not in the SEC case, in the civil case, or the criminal case. Everything that the criminal case that came on me and the SEC case, it's so old. The conduct was like 8 years old, some of it even more than a decade old. None of it was related to any of the business that I was conducting and that I had been doing for the past decade. And so, Jeff helped me negotiate a lot of these deals, and I put a lot of pressure. Some of them I had to sort of step back, and some of them I sort of, fought through. But without Jeff, I wouldn't have been able to do it, and he was very instrumental. And it sort of changed my whole attitude on, I toughened up a bit, saying, okay, I made some mistakes, and yes, I'm going through this criminal case and this civil case, but it doesn't mean that my life's over and I should be, cast aside. Surely there's other solutions, there's other ways to operate, and it was hard. It's not easy. Some banks banks decide to close your account. And, in the UK, you can't really fight banks and say, well, why are you closing my account? I didn't do anything wrong. None of the money that I brought into my bank account was proceeds of crime or fraudulent, and so I had to fight banks as well. And I had to, fight on all fronts. So it was difficult, and battling, you learn very quickly who your friends are when times are tough, and I'm sure as all of you know, and I was very fortunate that I have some very close friends that stuck by me, but it was a challenging time, and I fought this battle with the extradition for 2 years, and it cost me well over $1 million to fight this, and it was basically I was buying my freedom and time here while I was negotiating with the DOJ. And so what really happened is that I was willing day one to come to the US and be arraigned and plead not guilty. And my plan was to go to trial. But the DOJ, the Southern District of New York was very tough. They said, you can come, we'll give you bond, you can be free in the US, but you can't go back to the UK. And my kids are in school, they're in high school, and I have family in the UK. I can't live in the States and live in the US and New York and be the other side of the world for my kids growing up. These are their most important years. And so I fought hard, and I said, I rolled the dice, and I said, I could lose extradition, and then they're going to send me in shackles with the US Marshal, or I could win extradition. And winning extradition, just so you guys know, it's not a victory. It's a victory in a sense that they're not sending you to the US, but you're stuck in the UK forever. You can't leave the country. The minute you leave the country, you're getting arrested again and extradited from wherever you go. And so I knew that was going to end. And so, sure enough, as we were winning the extradition and the case was getting stronger in our favor, and we proved that, my lawyer came to the UK I had a trial in the UK for extradition, and we proved that probably 70-80% of their case, there were so many inconsistencies and factually incorrect information in the indictment and in the information that they gave to my extradition case, that even though 20-30% might have been correct, there were so many wrong things. Would have they actually indicted me for those things, or would have they been crimes in the UK? And the judge couldn't make his mind up in the UK whether to extradite me. He kept delaying and delaying and delaying. So the DOJ came finally one day knocking on my door, and they came to the lawyer and they said, what is it going to take for your client to come to the US and be arraigned? And we said, I will come and plead not guilty and go to trial, but I want the the ability to travel back to the UK, and I don't, I want to be able to go back home and be with my family. So they caved in and they gave me that. And, and I also said that I want to, when I'm flying with the US Marshals, I don't want to be shackled and I don't want to be handcuffed, and travel. I want to travel like, I'm their buddy. We're traveling together on a holiday back to the States. And so I met the US Marshals at Heathrow in end of March 2024 last year. And, they were very nice. They had come from, I think they were shopping at Harrods and they were late to the airport. And I was waiting there with a police officer who was going to cut my tag off. And, and then, they handed me over to the U.S. Marshals. We flew to, it was an experience. I flew to the New York with them. And then, they were very nice. I have to say, my experience with law enforcement in the UK and in the US was fantastic. I've not had any bad, like, knock on wood, I've not had any bad experiences yet. And so U.S. Marshals were great. The guy said to me, look, normally I have to shackle you on the plane and we have to do this sort of, walk and, and there are going to be people waiting outside. But, you've been well behaved and you've been nothing but great in the UK from what the police told me from the extradition team. So we're going to take you out. No one's going to see that we're with you and we're going to take you to the side. And that's what they did. They took me to the side. They, had to arrest me on the spot, read me my rights, everything, and handcuffed me. And they covered my handcuffs with a jacket so no one would see that I had handcuffs. And, the plainclothes marshals took me through passport control and everything went fine, and then I had my magistrate hearing and I received, my bail. Everything was like, went very smoothly and, I was out and, I got arraigned. A week later, I had my hearing with my judge and I pled not guilty. And I was supposed to receive discovery within 60 days. And they kept delaying and delaying and delaying and delaying. It took like 5 months, maybe even 6 months to get my discovery. And, sure enough, when we saw the discovery, just like the extradition case, 80-90% of the stuff was useless. They misread. They read the case wrong. They sort of skewed the case the wrong way. And, as my lawyer said to me, he said, a grand jury, the US is the only country really that has this grand jury system. It's basically a one-sided system. You have people coming in to a grand jury. They're typically forced to be there. They just want to go home and have dinner with their family or watch TV or go to a sports event or a bar with their friends. And they're forced to be in a room with people they don't know. And of course, they're not going to doubt that the DOJ is telling the truth or lying. And so they paint a picture of someone who must be a bad guy. He's committed this massive, he's like the reincarnation of the Wolf of Wall Street. He's created this financial fraud, and sure enough, of course, they're going to say they're going to indict you. And my lawyer says, look, I can indict a ham sandwich, at a grand jury thing. It's easy. And so, when push came to shove and we saw the discovery, the information was really maybe, 80% of it was misunderstood and 20% of it was still right, and that 20% was still right. And that's why I, pushed and pushed to negotiate a plea deal. And, we started negotiating a plea deal and, I wasn't happy with it and they weren't happy with the terms either. And, you push and shove a lot. And so the deal that I did was I pled guilty to one count, the conspiracy count. They dropped all the other charges, no money laundering, no wire fraud, no securities fraud. And the conspiracy count had a 5-year, statutory max, which was a lot better than, the 240 years and that I was looking at. The real advantage to my case was, there was the black swan event in my whole case was the elections were coming up in November 2024. And everybody in SDNY knew that the U.S. attorney, Damian Williams, he was the first guy that was going to be fired. Everybody knew it. And and it was obvious he was going to leave office before he got fired. And then they knew they were going to fire a whole bunch of the line supervisors and AUSAs were going to leave as well. And, Trump won and that's what happened. And, so they wanted me to enter my guilty plea and have my Rule 11 hearing the day before the election. So November 4th, I had my hearing literally. I remember coming to New York, November 4th, and it was, I had my hearing and literally it was like New York changed the next day. It was like, Armageddon. It went from, a city full of homeless people and crime to sort of like the safest city in America all of a sudden. And so I pled guilty. They gave me, the same bond conditions, let me fly back to the UK. My plea deal wasn't perfect, but you know what the reason I did the deal was, it allowed me to limit my financial loss. If I went to trial and I lost, I was looking at like the numbers they were throwing were ridiculous numbers, and I knew they had to prove them, but they were throwing like 75 million, 100 million. It was crazy. And, if I went to trial and lost, they would have, thrown the book at me. And so I took I made the decision that, I could get 5 years, which is the max. Maybe I get less if I'm lucky. But the real benefit for me was I didn't want to have this, black cloud over my head of a huge forfeiture. Because, it's different. If you're American and you live in the States and you have a big forfeiture or restitution, you pay just a percentage of your income until the day until you're like 65 or 70 or the day you die. I don't know how it goes. But if you're a foreigner, they put the whole thing over your head and they can pursue you all around the world. You can't do anything. You can't do business, you can't buy anything, you can't borrow, you can't do anything. So I limited the financial loss. It was a good deal for me and for my family, and it also limited the time away from my family. And I advised a lot of this. I had a lot of talks with, Jeff, also with Brent Cassidy, who's on this call, with, David Israel, who's a good friend. I was also on this call. Brad Rouse, who's on this call too. And lots of people that just who'd gone through it, and just asking advice and going back. And everyone said, listen, you have to make the decision yourself. No one can tell you what to do. And you have to trust your gut. And my gut was, look, what I did wrong was I hid my beneficial ownership. I used nominees. I hid my ownership, and I didn't disclose when I was selling. It's a gray area. Is it criminal? Is it civil? Under this administration, it probably would have been an SEC case and it wouldn't have been a criminal case. But, I got indicted under the Biden administration, which was, wanted it to be a criminal case. And it got charged as a criminal case, and they're not going to throw it out. So, and the judge I have also is an Obama appointee, who is a very tough judge, very, very by the book, very fair. I have to say he was an amazing judge, and, he was really very fair with me and with the case. And, he gave me 6 months between my guilty plea and the sentencing to get my affairs in order and organize the money for my forfeiture. Um, and so, and then I moved on to, the PSI. And, the PSI, I have to stress to people who haven't done it, who are on this call, that's, I didn't understand until, really while I was preparing for it, how important the, probation services interviews to that, PSR, the report. It's almost like the Bible for the judge. A lot of the time people, they don't take it seriously enough, and, I was very fortunate that I had people to advise with about it. Like, again, like Jeff and like Brad and, other people that, Justin Paperny as well helped me with it as well, gave me advice, and Michael Santos. I had, people that are in this community that, I really took it seriously, and they all said, you can't sell, don't sell yourself, don't promote yourself. And that's hard for me because my whole life is I'm like a stock promoter and I'm selling, I have to sell everything. I'm selling myself, I'm selling my deals, I'm selling projects. So you have to sort of shut down that promoter and salesman role and really focus on, being authentic and making sure that you own your story and you own your narrative. And, if you have problems in your family, don't hide them. Don't be embarrassed. If you have your own health problems or, mental health problems or physical health problems, and I went through some major surgeries, I had 2 spine fusion surgeries, which make me, and I try and hide it, and you shouldn't hide it, and I have, children that had some issues and stuff. And so I had to go through, and it's hard to go through that stuff. And so, I think I was very authentic. I had a very good probation officer who was also very fair and gave me as much time. Everyone was saying, you'll have an hour, it'll be an hour and a half. Mine took like 4 or 5 hours. We were with this guy. He asked a lot of questions. I didn't expect it because we gave him a lot of information. So he really reviewed and asked questions. And, the report came back, you agree with some stuff, you don't agree with some stuff. Probation asked for 36 months in the report, not the 60 months that was my cap. And, the DOJ asked for 48 months. And, now we had the sentencing hearing coming up. I got sentenced in May, and we walked into this. And this is really, this is your only chance and your only opportunity to get your side of the story in front of the judge. And, if you're in a situation like mine where, you did a plea deal and you pled guilty and you accepted responsibility and you're remorseful and you accept what you did was wrong and you show how much you've changed and what you've done since, the indictment, which I think I did, and I showed it and it came across well. And, the judge was very fair, and he sentenced me to 20 months. I think that, we were asking for probation, and my lawyer came in and said to me when we were walking to court, he said to me, "Today is going to be a version of bad news." Okay? It doesn't You're going to get some bad news. It's, how bad the news is, it depends on the judge. And he says the only person who knows what sentence you're going to get is the judge. And he will come in here already with a number in his mind. But if he doesn't take a big break, he's had a number. And if he takes a big break, then we convinced him to change his mind. And so I had people come in to talk, and people that came in to talk, they came in to talk from the heart. He wasn't expecting it. And it was, it's difficult when you don't have family and you're not from the US. And I had people fly in and come and speak on my behalf. And, I had a lot of others. He actually read everything. Okay. And so what's interesting about my case is, which is very rare in a white collar case, and this is why my hearing took a long time, is he said to the DOJ, there are no victims in my case. Not one person came forward. Can you imagine a case of like, what they're saying, $100 million and, SEC 145, 3 years, you don't have one victim come forward. So the judge is saying that the government changed their attitude in the sentencing and said, this case is not about loss, it's about gain. It's about what? Yes. So this isn't about loss. It's about gain. It's about what Bauer and his partners made. It's not about what people lost, because there are no victims here, and we accept that there are no victims here and that people, and so we just said even the judge said it, that's just ridiculous here. So, but, it is what it is. And, my forfeiture, and this is all public information. My forfeiture was, 4.3 million. There was zero restitution and zero penalty and fine, which is, obviously indicates that there's no victims and no one lost money because there's no restitution or penalty or fine. The forfeiture was discounted. So basically my deal with the DOJ, and this is why I did my plea deal also, was that if I paid $1 million by sentencing, they would waive the balance of the 3.3. And the reason they did that is because they said they can't get a percentage from my income because I don't live in the US and I'm not a US resident or citizen. And they'd rather I pay a big amount that would cause me harm day one rather than have to chase me through, Washington and the Department of Justice all around the world to try and find money and spend money on that. So, but I had to pay it by sentencing. That's why they gave me the 6 months. So I paid my forfeiture in full and satisfied it by sentencing. And that was it, and the outcome of my sentence was, listen, am I happy? You're never happy when you get a sentence and you might have to go to prison. It's not a great feeling, obviously. But, when I look to the beginning of the journey, where I was day one, when I first met Jeff and David Israel and a lot of these people, and where I am now, listen, this was probably one of the best things that happened to me. I know it's ridiculous to say that at this stage. My life, yeah, okay, my life is going to be different for sure. It's, I was on a different trajectory, but, I was traveling around the world. I'm much closer to my kids and family now than I've ever been. I'm in the best shape of my life. I've lost a lot of weight. I'm healthier, and I understand also, what's important in life and what's not. I lost I was carrying so many people that were useless and dead weight and taking advantage of me and my success and my money making ability and my business. And it's sort of, I shed a lot of dead weight. I know now, I'd rather have really good friends on two hands than have, all these acquaintances that are useless. And so that sort of changed my perspective on life. And I think the silver lining here in this whole case is that, I basically cut corners, and I cut these corners, I hid my ownership. And what's interesting is, like, imagine like you're going into the casino with a full deck of cards, but you already have a good hand. You're going to win because you already have a good hand. I already had a winning hand. I didn't need to use a full deck of cards. I didn't need to hide my ownership. I didn't need to use nominees. I didn't need to use, Swiss banks and these complicated structures to make money because I was making money legitimately on my name, disclosing it. And that's why they wanted to take me down, because I was so prolific and my name was everywhere. I was an easy target. And so the silver lining is that, it's better to take, people like to take shortcuts in life, and I took shortcuts. I took it because it was easy, but comfort kills you. And if you take shortcuts in life, it comes back to bite you, and, even if it's a decade later. And so it's important, take the road less traveled, take the hard path in life. Don't take the easy path because, comfort kills you and it'll come back to bite you in the ass. And so I learned a hard lesson, and I'll probably have to spend some time in prison, and I'll have lots of time to read more and get more philosophical. But I'm very fortunate to all these people in the community. People like Jeff Grant who helped me, Walt Pavlo, David Israel, who's been a very close friend and a confidant as well. Brent Cassidy, who's been a great friend as well. Drew Chapin, who has been great as well. Joel Sickler, who as well I worked with, in the beginning and helped me with a lot of information. Justin Paperny, Michael Santos, Brad Rouse as well as on this call has been amazing. These are just a few of the people. This community's been fantastic. I haven't been able to be as active because of the time difference. When you guys have your meetings, it's like midnight for me in the UK, but I've always tried to participate. I've participated in the conferences, and I'm very close, like I said, with Jeff. I speak to him all the time, and David Israel, and also Brent and a lot of the other people on this. And my key takeaway for everyone on this call is that life moves on. No one cares about us. Whether you go to jail or don't go to jail, you're indicted, you're not indicted. We're like a spoke in the wheel, for the DOJ and the SEC and all these organizations. And nothing's personal. These DOJ guys, I looked at them after when I got at the sentencing. They came out and said, listen, we're happy this came. The FBI guy and the DOJ guy, they're just doing a job. They don't care about me. Who am I? I'm like a number to them, a statistic. They're going to be on the other side of the table in a year or two representing people like us. And so I think at the end of the day, it's like, don't take it so personal, pause, take a breath, calm down. I got really stressed out in the beginning. And then, now I just don't take things as to heart as much anymore. This has really changed my whole perspective on life and what's important. And, we'll all get through this. Even none of us have killed anyone. This is mainly white collar crime. So it's like you made a mistake. It's okay to make mistakes. You can correct those mistakes and fix them. You can fix it with time and money and redemption and remorse. And so that's my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Um, Thank you so much, Ron. It was really, really beautiful, really beautifully done. And I can tell you that you helped a lot of people already tonight. All right, folks, if you'd like to ask Ron a question or share your experience, please put your name in chat and I will call on you. And I'm going to go to I'm going to ask the first question. Ron, I know since this happened, you have devoted yourself to a lot of charitable work, foundation work. You're working with people in the US and the UK on criminal justice issues. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
Perfect. Yeah. So for the past, 3 years, I've been very actively involved in the justice impact community. So in the UK, right away, I looked for, how can I, I'm very fortunate. I know I'm like 1% of people in this situation because, I had a business. I've always been independent and entrepreneurial. So I didn't have a job that I lost. And now I have, I'm out of my home. I've always been independent and entrepreneurial. So I understood how to sort of get back on my feet. And so I got involved in the UK with a social impact company that basically goes into prisons and retrains people for when they come out of prison to set up businesses. And we're not even talking about like fintechs or tech companies. Like you might want to be a plasterer or a painter or a plumber and you need help. How do I set up a company? How do I set up a sole trader? How do I register with the IRS? How do I get a bank account? How do I invoice? And so I helped train a couple of cohorts in prison coming out, which was, very rewarding. And then I helped get involved with the guy's business, set it up, and he's now launching in the States. And then, I've launched with Phil, the same guy, a charity here in the UK that basically we give grants to those people. So, giving them anywhere from, £5,000 to £20,000 to help set up their business. We've raised money from donors here in the UK and we're giving them grants. And then I'm currently setting up a 501c3 in the US. It should be ready in the next month or two. It's already set up, but it's now going through all the channels, something I asked you to get involved with, Jeff. And I'm going to reach out, David and Brent, to you guys as well on that. But basically, it's a similar charity. And the idea is, we have a bunch of big donors. The idea is people that have come through the justice impacted community in the US have either been in prison or on probation or have come out of a sentence, and they're creating a business that has some sort of social impact or community support or benefit, we will give you a grant and we'll give you mentorship. So you'll get free mentorship for a year and you'll get money, and we'll help guide you along the process of setting up that business. I was a mentor with DeFi Ventures and Village Capital. And I met a number of founders and entrepreneurs through that accelerator. One of them was given, a $30,000 grant from that accelerator, and I was his mentor. And I ended up investing in his business with my friend, and he's now doing a crowdfunding. He couldn't get accepted on any of these portals, and we got him accepted on one of the biggest ones. And we helped him raise capital too, and he's on his road to success. And I've been involved in a number of those projects since then. And I'm taking a very active role in getting involved in anything to do with this community, because this community has given me so much and has been so helpful to me. I feel that now that I'm almost at the end of my journey, in this process, I have to give back and help others going through it that are less fortunate.
Jeff, how do I ask the question here?
Go ahead, Joel. Ask the question.
All right. First off, Ron, you look great. You look very, very fit. And your presentation was absolutely fantastic. And I'm very happy for you. I personally, knowing about the case, thought that the sentence was quite good. Could have been better, so be it. Could have been a lot worse, so be it. But now I'm going to ask a couple of practical questions here. You do not have to answer these, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think you're in good hands with Jeff, Santos, Justin, Walt, etc. Okay. Where are you designated? When are you going in? Do you have an immigration attorney? What are your plans for ultimately being removed from the country after your federal sentence is over?
Okay, those are good questions. So I'm not going to be designated for a long time because I have a due to family situation, I have a delayed reporting date. So I don't have to report till July next year, July 2026. So I have a year delay.
That's very interesting. Okay, very good.
And that's a very rare situation.
Extremely rare.
Extremely rare. And again, because I had a fantastic judge and I have, some family situations. And so I will probably get designated a few months before. The BOP said that they're not going to designate me until a few months before because they don't know the capacities of different different prisons.
Yeah.
I have a really good immigration lawyer who used to be at DHS and ICE, and she's very, very familiar with the situation. And it's a very fluid situation, as you know. What advice I get today could be different in 2 months. It's changed. It's so. The benefit for me is there's no point for me to engage. So obviously, as Joel's asking this question for those of you that don't understand why, is because I'm a foreigner, the minute I come in, I'm going to have a detainer put on me by ICE, and then it means I'm going to be deported at the end of my sentence. And there are certain prisons that have ICE facilities, like Allenwood is where a lot of foreigners go to, which is a low security. But some people in some situations, if you plan it, there's been certain situations, if you have the right immigration attorney, you can negotiate a self-deportation order where you have to leave the US within a certain number of days. And there are some cases in that situation where you can remain in the US for X period of time. But the rules again are changing. They're very, what was available in the Biden administration is different in the Trump administration, and who knows where it's going to be in 3 months or 6 months. So to answer that question is, I don't know right now what the situation is. The immigration lawyer I have, who's amazing. I mean, look, she got out of prison, Anna Del Vey, and she's her immigration lawyer. So the fact that she's fought for her to remain in the U.S. for so long when she should have been deported already years ago is a good indicator, a good signal. And the fact that she was in DHS and ICE as an in-house counsel, and now she's a private counsel, is also good. But, she's the first one, Joel, like you, to say, I can't give anyone an answer. So we're going to engage with the BOP probably 6 months before, or when I get a a reporting date.
Okay. I'll just.
But I hope you can help me with that. I hope you can help me with that.
Well,
Joel, we're gonna go to the next person, okay?
All right, that's fine. All right, I'm out.
Joel,
No
we'll
worries.
connect after.
Thank you, Joel. We're all in touch with each other. Let's see. Someone wants to know if you will share your contact information so people can reach out to you. Is that a yes or no?
Yeah, you can share my email and it's gladly.
Okay, I'll put it in chat in a little while. Stephen, you have a question? No, I'm sorry, Enrique.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, thank you, man. Thank you for sharing this story. It's kind of your story is similar to mine. My attorney, similar in the attorney phase, and changing and getting a fighter and all that. I did a plea deal, and I'm going to sentencing in August 18. And I just wanted to ask some advice on like when you said like you had people that because I don't think in my sentencing I'm allowed. I don't know if Florida's this district, the 11th district. I don't know if it's different, but I haven't been asked to. I did put together like 30 letters from business people that know me. I'm also an independent entrepreneur all my life, so I have some very, very strong letters from a lot of supporters, not just, it's easy to get from family and friends, but to get, you got to tell the whole story and everything to get these letters from family, from business acquaintances, people that know you from working together and all that. And obviously the group here, has
I
been.
think so Southern District of New York is the toughest district, okay?
Okay.
Honestly. And I had 4 people speak, okay? Including I had, 4 people speak, and then I had, my wife also speak, and then I spoke as well. And Florida, I think is a little easier than Southern District of New York. I think if you want people to speak, you need to submit you don't have to submit it as part of your sentencing memorandum, but what you need to do is get your lawyer to contact the DOJ. Is it a DOJ case, your case, or is it a state case?
Yeah, DOJ.
It's a DOJ. So they should go to the AUSA on your case for sure, your attorney, and say, these are a list of people that are going to speak. I would recommend, obviously, you want to speak. I don't know
Yes.
if you're married or not. You want to get your wife to speak as well. And I think it's important to get people to speak. Like my rabbi flew from London to speak. Okay, he's American and he knows me for. I don't know if you're Christian or.
Yeah, I'm Christian, but I have like 4 pastors.
Yeah, so
coming
get the
through
one
this.
that knows you the most. Like my rabbi knows me and my family for 15 years. I'm part of the community. It's not like I found religion the day I was indicted. I was active in my community for 15 years. My kids were bar mitzvah there. I'm a very active member. So the rabbi flew all the way over, and he's American too. He's not, British, and he's from Connecticut, and he spoke from the heart, someone that knows me, And so I think people that you've touched, I had this guy that I mentored, for 3 years and invested in his business. Not that I had to. I did it before I knew whether I was going to go to trial or not. He was a guy that was in jail for 10 years, came out. Jeff knows who he is. I won't mention his name here, but came out, turned his life around, is a successful entrepreneur. He came and spoke on my behalf, and he said to the judge, look, I would have never thought I'd stand in front of you, giving a reference on someone. I was always a defendant in front of you, and I spent time in jail. And the judge is like, so I think you want to bring people in there that will speak from the heart and know you, not from the crime or the plea or what you did, but people that and that have an experience with you that's been positive, and whether it's a friend that knows you from childhood or someone you grew up with or a pastor or your wife or a business partner or someone that, you touch their life, and help them. I think that's key. But you need to do it early. You don't want to leave it like a week before.
No.
Getting sentenced in a month.
Your speech, did you read it out or did you just spoke from the heart?
No, I read.
Enrique, we'll put you in touch with Ron, all right, so that you can ask like.
No problem. But to answer that question, I read it out. I read it out because I was nervous. Of course, I was very nervous. So yes, I read it.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Enrique, hit me up. I'll send you Ron's contact information.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Stephen, do you have a question? Stephen, you in there? Let's see. Gordon, is there something that you want?
Okay, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, Ron, first of all, I want to say thank you for your story. Very inspiring. Had a similar case as yours. Me and my co-defendant, who's currently on the call too. However, we went to trial and received lengthy sentences. I was fortunate to benefit from some of the uh, processes that happened through the Trump and Biden administration. I was fortunate to receive a clemency. And so now in the process of putting the life back together, and just wanted to see how I can communicate with you in terms of structuring my business back in place, what I was currently in because of, the fallout and the disgrace
No, of course.
that your name's attached to the felony. And when the government blasts your write up all across the world, and your name is Googled, and how that affects your business standing.
Yes, no, definitely. And I mean, and it's a constant battle. But I mean, listen, reach out to me gladly, Stephen. I'm happy. Jeff will give you my details and
Great.
reach out to me and happy to have a call with you anytime, and happy to
Awesome.
give and congratulations that you got clemency. Did you get a commutation or a pardon?
I
Yeah.
actually got the computation, and the beautiful thing about it was I still had 7 years to go.
Oh
There
my
you
God.
go. Well,
Yeah, so that
Lucky
was
you.
pretty awesome. Yeah.
well, Stephen, are you applying for pardon?
Yes, I am. I am. And then I was excited to see your program about the expungement. And I want to definitely get involved and see how I can help you guys with that process because especially with this administration, I think it's a strong possibility.
Thank you,
How
Steve.
much time did you actually serve before you got the commutation?
I actually ended up serving 7 years. 7 years. Went to
Wow.
trial, and judge ended up giving me 15 years, 8 months. And the funny thing about it is there were no victims who showed up there. It was just crazy, but it was more or less um, the I was dealing with international finance and bond and structures, similar to you. The unfortunate part was neither the prosecutor, the judge, nor my lawyer knew how to fight the case.
Yeah.
And so it was just easy to sway the jury and says, this is not coming. And I'm like, but Your Honor, this is not U.S. governed business. This is international. That's not how we do it in the U.S. And of course, the jury bought into it. But the beautiful thing about it is, like you shedded all the dead weight. All the true friends were there for the 7 years, still there. In fact, I'm traveling with a very good friend here in Cancun, was there day one,
Okay,
and
amazing.
still there. So,
Great. Well, sounds like you came out the other side well.
Amen,
yes,
amen, brother. Stephen,
appreciate it.
contact me. I'll give you all Ron's information.
I'll do that. Thank
Anybody
you.
who wants more information about the federal expungement initiative that we've started, you can find that on our website or go to federalexpungement.org and fill out the forms there. And we are enrolling supporters right now. Anybody else have a question for Ron or a comment? Anybody? Going once?
I have a quick comment.
Yep, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Raphael Cantu. Hey Ron, it's great to see
Hey,
you,
Rafa, how
man.
are you, my friend?
Yeah,
Good to see you.
good. Came
Didn't realize
across
you were on
my email. I said, "Oh, Ron's speaking." I haven't been a part of this group. I have a blue collar criminal history, but I can tell you that right when this happened to Ron, that's when I met him, and I was at that time I was working with Prison Fellowship, and he called me. He's like, "This system is jacked up. What can I do to help?" And I think that was even before you met Phil. And so I'm just happy to hear that, although not perfect, things have worked out well for you. I'll connect
Yeah.
with you offline. I want to hear about what you're doing with your
Yeah,
nonprofit
gladly. I'd love
in
to
the
connect.
States.
Yeah,
And
so good to see you.
good to see you, man. I'm glad things are going well.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you, Raphael. That's awesome. Anybody else? Comment, question, anything? All right. So before we get off, I'm just going to plug that Brent has interviewed Ron for his podcast. So if you go to Nightmare Success or just Google Nightmare Success, and you'll find Brent's podcast, and Ron's episode on it is terrific. So I'll definitely suggest that. And Ron is going to be a sponsor of our conference, so we're very happy about that. And we maybe a little surprise coming up with one of the projects that Ron's working on, but I'm not going to drop that tonight. So, and everybody, thank you so much. Ron Bauer, thank you so much for being so kind and trusting us and giving us so much information. Really, really wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Reach out to one another. Have a good week, and join us Monday night if you are directly justice. Blessings, everyone.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Jeff.